We've been, but this needs to be recorded, doesn't it? I suppose. So yeah, we've been thinking about how can we best use the data. So people are collecting loads and loads of data as part of the Big Rock Pool Challenge. How best to use it, and definitely the best way, one of the best ways, is to record non-native species, and that's what we're focusing on the National BioBlitz. So I thought it'd be important to actually have a session looking at species that people might find, non-native species, and just having a look at the key features that you can use to identify them. So that's what the session is all about today. You might have heard when Christoph has just started recording this session. So a few people have asked if it's going to be shared afterwards. It will be. So just please be aware of that, and feel free to turn your camera off if you'd rather not be on YouTube further down the line. Okay, so the talk today is going to, first of all, just talk a little bit about us. So Christoph has told us a little bit about the Rockpool project. So I'll just expand on that a little bit more, and the Big Rockpool Challenge, just to make sure that everybody's fully up to speed about what it's all about. And then we're going to look at non-native species in general, sometimes called invasive species. So we'll look at those two terms and just scope out exactly what they are. And then we're going to consider about what you can actually do to help with the issue of non-native species. And basically, what we're going to be saying is get involved with the Big Rockpool Challenge National BioBlitz. But we'll talk a little bit about more how to do that. And then the most important part of the meeting, at least probably the whole second half of the meeting, we'll be looking at specific species that you might find. There'll be other species. There are plenty of non-native species out there, but we'll be covering the 10 most common ones around the country. Okay, so the Rockpool project, as Christoph mentioned, is all about connecting people through to their marine natural heritage through the power of rock pooling, and we're very lucky, not just down here in the southwest, but in many places around the country. We've got some fantastic rocky shore intertidal habitat, and inside that intertidal habitat, there's a whole host of amazing species. And those species are not just amazing in their own right; they're amazing at bringing people together, and that's what we've really learned over the past 8 years that we've been running as a not-for-profit organisation. That there are important scientific benefits to getting people collecting data and just identifying species, but we've just really noticed how it's particularly brought people together, often at a time when people really needed that. So what we're looking to do with the Big Rockpool Challenge, which is on the slide here, is to really sort of ramp that up. And in some ways, we're taking inspiration from Parkrun. So a few of you would have, I'm sure many of you have heard of Parkrun. A few people might have got involved with Parkrun. Parkrun is, for those of you who don't know, it's a weekly community fun run event that's run entirely by volunteers. And we're looking to do something along those lines, have regular community rock pooling events that are entirely volunteer-led, and that means that we can expand to many more locations quite quickly, and that's what we're looking to do. It's made possible by funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and Scottish Power, as Christoph mentioned, and we've been running since October last year. And the initial phase, which we've got through now, has been developing everything we do with our activities to enable those volunteers, for them to be 100% volunteer run, which previously we'd always have some staff available running the events. And so we really had to sort of tailor them to make sure they were suitable for volunteers. And we have undergone a period of consultation, co-development with our long-standing volunteers to really design how that can happen. And that's what's happening now in our original hubs in Falmouth and Plymouth. And now we're at the stage where we're looking to copy and paste that to new locations. And we've got a few locations that are interested. But if anybody is interested in, even just vaguely interested in, and perhaps having a monthly community rock pooling event in their location, we can support that. We have funding to grow to 6 new locations this year, and there will be an application process over the summer for that. But please do just go to our website, click on Get Involved, and start a new hub, and just register your interest, and then you'll be kept up to speed with developments on that. So the way that the Big Rockpool Challenge works is we have monthly community BioBlitz battle events, and hopefully one or two of you who are down here might have been involved in these already. A BioBlitz battle is a 90-minute community rock pool event where people team up into small teams, and they spend 90 minutes just exploring and recording as many different species as they can. And the exciting twist about it is that you get points for every single species that you find, depending on how rare that species is. And that makes it really exciting in terms of finding new stuff all the time, and not just sort of racking up things that you're very familiar with. And we've seen in our own communities how people have really got into rock pooling and learning about all sorts of different new species. I suppose inspired by that sort of friendly competitive spirit. And over the winter that we've been running this challenge so far, we've had really big turnout and some great feedback. So we're really excited about the future. That happens for 11 of the 12 months per year. And then in September, we have our annual Rock Pool Finals event. So this is a big 24-hour BioBlitz event where we invite everybody from around the country to join. And this year we've got this it's booked in, but we haven't advertised it yet because we'll do so straight after the National BioBlitz. But I can tell you it'll be in Porthpeen in St Austell, and there'll be further details after the National BioBlitz, as I mentioned. So these BioBlitz battle events, they involve people recording species on their phone using iNaturalist, and that facilitates the game. So we actually pull the data from iNaturalist, and then we award every individual and every team points based on how many species they've found. So the data is very important in that respect. But of course, it can be, at the moment, with the two hubs running, we average about 1,000 records per event, per weekend. And that's a lot of data that can be used for conservation purposes. And our initial focus with that is working with Natural England and the work that they do with non-native species to get the information that we've recorded to them as quickly as possible. The current approach for this, for many recording channels, is to go via what's called the National Biodiversity Network, and that can be quite slow in terms of how long it actually takes them. It can take them over a year. I've been told in some cases as many as long as 5 years for that information to go via the National Biodiversity Network to them. The beauty of iNaturalist is that as soon as you've recorded something, it's available for anybody to access. And so we've built a system by after every round of monthly events, we send an alert to Natural England, and we send them a full database, or they're given access to the full database of all the non-native species that have been recorded. And this is on iNaturalist itself. If you go to the iNaturalist website and type this in, anyone can access it at any time. And this is just a subset of the main data set, which is also available on iNaturalist. If you type in Big Rockpool Challenge, you'll see everything that we've recorded. We're over 10,000 species now that have been recorded. The actual list that's been given to us to actually define which of these species are indeed non-native was developed by Natural England in partnership with Dr. John Bishop and Chris Wood, who work at the MBA. And I'm delighted to say that both John and Chris are joining us tonight. These two people have dedicated their careers to studying marine non-natives in this country, and there's probably nobody that knows more about them than they do. So I would say, deferring to them when we get onto some of the species discussions, because they'll certainly know more than me about a lot of them, particularly ones that aren't so common down here in the Southwest. Most of them are, but some of them less so. So thank you very much for joining us today, guys. So that's really what we're doing at the moment at the Rock Pool project. But let's have a little look at non-native species in general. So a non-native, sometimes called an alien species, I think that's more of a sort of North American term, is just a species that's found outside of its native range. And I suppose the extension of that would be that if it's outside of its native range and it hasn't, its range hasn't expanded naturally, then it has to be there has to be because people have actually caused that to happen. And so it's a human-induced problem. You may well be more familiar with the term invasive. So invasives are a subset of non-native species. So all invasive species are non-native, but not all non-native species are invasive. So an invasive species is a species that spreads rapidly and causes harm to the environment, economy, or human health. And we've got a couple of UK examples of invasive species here. We've got the grey squirrel, which a lot of people are familiar with. I think I could say that the grey squirrel is the most commonly recorded species in iNaturalist for the UK, and so it's quite a successful invasive species. It's outcompeted the red squirrel, of course, in many places around the country. And so it's not just a non-native that's here and not having any impact at all. It's had a serious negative impact. And then similarly, in the top right there, we've got Japanese knotweed, which is probably one of the most infamous non-native invasive species that we've got here in the UK and causes serious problems for buildings all around the country. Now, marine non-native species, there are a lot of similarities between marine non-natives and terrestrial non-natives. In terms of the problems that they can cause, they are they do have some special characteristics in terms of how they actually move from their native range into their non-native range, and also in terms of how what people can do about it once that's happened. One of the big issues, and that's what we're hopefully addressing here with this campaign, is that it's much less visible when this happens. So this is basically because people don't live in the sea. There are many more eyes. In fact, before we got involved here in the UK, at least, there was a massive bias on iNaturalist to terrestrial species. And it is difficult to record marine species when you're not a marine species yourself. But the beauty of rock pooling, of course, is that the tide moves out twice a day and leaves us with these little windows of into the ocean world that we can explore. And so this is a fantastic opportunity, and we want to make the most of it. There are also fewer natural barriers in the ocean, and so this makes it a lot easier, particularly when a species has arrived from somewhere else in the world, to spread, and that has obviously implications for management and makes it harder to eradicate species generally. I mean, it can be very hard to eradicate species terrestrially at all, but marine ones particularly so. These are three of the main pathways by which marine non-natives are spread around the world. The aquarium trade. So I've spent a fair bit of time in my early career researching Caribbean reef fish. And when I first started there were these species down in the bottom left here, lionfish, were not present at all, and now they're a major problem throughout the entire region. And they believe that they were released from an aquarium in Florida, and that's what's called, and everything is spread from that. We have a lionfish problem now in the Mediterranean as well. I should imagine that's a separate event. But could quite possibly be via the aquarium trade as well, because they're very popular aquarium fish. The shipping, I don't know if John and Chris would agree, but it seems to me to be one of the most prevalent ways that marine species can get about, either from being a fouling species, which is attached to the hull of a ship as it moves around, or in the ballast water of the ship. So the ship's taking water to keep them stable in a port in one place, and they release that ballast water in a destination. And many marine species have what's called a planktonic life cycle. When they're a young species, they'll be they'll be tiny and drifting on the plankton that can easily get scooped up as ballast water and deposited elsewhere. And that's also something which increases the dispersal ability of marine species. So another reason why they can be difficult to control. And aquaculture is also something that's caused a lot of problems. We'll see that with some of the species when we go through them. So quite often people are deliberately bringing species from one part of the world to another because they believe that they will actually be beneficial for aquaculture. And sometimes they stay within that aquaculture environment, and sometimes they don't. They get out and that start causing all sorts of problems. So what have we seen here in the UK as far as non-natives are concerned? So this is data that I've pulled from the central repository for biodiversity data in this country, the NBN Atlas. And it dates all the way back for non-natives to 1890, and this species of seaweed called Bon Mason's hookweed. I know that John and Chris have told me that there are some important data sets that haven't made it onto the NBN Atlas, so there's more to the story than what I'm going to show you here. The other thing that I've noticed myself with the data that I have obtained is not all of it has coordinates of where the record was actually found. So obviously they can't be mapped as well. But the Bon Mason's hookweed was originally, well, the oldest record on the NBN Atlas is back in 1890 from the south coast of England. From there, it was the only invasive species for a little while, and it stayed on the south coast of England as we moved into the 20th century. And then oyster thief arrives, and you can see oyster thief also down there in the south and spreading around there. And then slipper limpet, we'll have a look at that. Pacific oyster, very serious invasive that we have here in this country, arrives also in the sort of early 20th century. And some of these species, difficult to say. Again, John and Chris will know better than me if it's due to recording patterns or whether they actually weren't very prevalent for a long period of time and then became much more abundant much more recently. But you can see as we approach the end of the 20th century, we've got more and more species arriving, and these are some of the top 7 that have ever been recorded that we've got coloured here, and into the 80s, we're starting to see good coverage all around the country of non-native species. And then from there on in, it basically just grows and grows. I'll just be quiet for a second, and you can see what happens as we approach the most recent 2 decades. And records just go absolutely through the roof. And actually, some of the New Zealand barnacle and wireweed, which are 2 of the later arriving ones, actually end up being 2 of the most well-recorded non-native species in the country. So even though they arrived late, they've made up for it and really sort of spread around the country pretty quickly. You can see that from this bar chart, which is based on the same data. These are the top 10 species that have been found around the country, and the New Zealand barnacle is by far the most recorded. And then coupled to be aware of a slipper limpet and Japanese wireweed. I would say that if you're getting involved in the National Challenge and you're looking to record non-native species, which is what we want you to do, make sure that you're aware of those 3 at least, because they're present in most places, not all, and we'll be interested to know if they do arrive in any new places. These are by far not the only non-native species. In the iNaturalist database, at least we've got about 35 of the 45 that on the list that we were provided that have records, and I'm sure that there are other records which are in the NBN for some of the other species. So I would say there's probably about 40 non-native species as yet, and it's growing all the time. In terms of what you can do, if you haven't already, make sure you sign up to the National BioBlitz. So you can sign up on our website here. It will take you through to our online hub where you can sign up. Before you actually go out and record, you'll need to actually also get the iNaturalist app on your phone. So we'll be emailing you instructions of how to do that and how to link that with your Rockpooler project account. Once you've done that, your account will be added to the National BioBlitz on iNaturalist, and you'll be able to see your records being added. All you'll need to do is go down to the beach and see what you can see, and to record as much as you can record, and just do it in your own time. You don't have to just record non-native species. In fact, I would encourage you not to do that because lots of people, and I mean, some of the species that we're working with here, I've for a long time didn't realize they were non-native, and so just go ahead and record stuff and identify them as best you can. But the community on iNaturalist, and we'll be having a look at your records as well, can help you out with identification. So don't be frightened of recording stuff incorrectly. We'll be checking everything out, and other people will be too, and helping you out with your identification. There is, if you haven't used iNaturalist before yourself, a really good AI feature on it that can identify things pretty accurately as well. So don't be frightened to use that as well. In terms of non-natives, this is a fantastic guide that John and Chris have put together, which is available as a PDF download. We've got a link to it on our National BioBlitz page. Do download it and use it. All of the examples that we're going through here, all the species are on there, and there's some brilliant advice about how to actually identify these species and also distinguish them from other native species. And the last thing before we get onto the species profiles is just to make you aware of the Non-Native Species Secretariat website. This has also got some great information for identification, but it has extensive information on the history and impact of each of these species as well. So for any additional information, make sure you check this website out. So I'll go through the top 10 species in decreasing order from the most recorded to the least recorded. So the most recorded species is the we call it the New Zealand barnacle. So I've noticed that it's also called quite often the Darwin's barnacle, which is a better name really for it because it's not only from New Zealand, it's native to Australasia in general, so sort of southern Australia and New Zealand. And Charles Darwin did describe it as well, so it's probably nice to acknowledge that. Latin name is Ostrominius modestus, and it's a small white barnacle. This is not life size. It's the same size as a regular barnacle, I would say. And barnacles are notoriously tricky when it comes to identification. Personally, I feel like I've got my eye in with this one a little bit. But this is probably a species that takes a bit of a time to get used to. One of the key features to look out for are the 4 outer shell plates. So our native species tend to have 6 outer shell plates, and it can be quite tricky sometimes to count them, but not on the invasive species, not on the New Zealand barnacle. They tend, not often anyway, they tend to be quite clear. So if you're unsure, there's a good chance that it isn't. But as I say, feel free to record it, and people will have a look at it. And it has a diamond-shaped opening. Another name, again, for it is the beaked barnacle, and that is also quite a good name. You can see how it's got this sort of like got an evil smile here, and if you see them, in 3D, they do look a bit sort of beaky, sticking out there. So that's an identification feature. And it's been said to be similar to our northern acorn barnacle, which is a species that we're seeing less and less of down here in the southwest, still common elsewhere in the country. Look out for that one. That one has 6 plates rather than than 4. That's the biggest difference from it. And I also find the color a little bit different. These guys are more of a sort of a pearly sort of white. So with the Northern Acorn barnacles, this one's quite pure white, but they can be more sort of grey. Found all around the country, and even though it's very well recorded on NBN, our rarity points are based on iNaturalist records, and obviously people aren't recording it quite so much there yet. So you get 2 rarity points for that. And don't forget, during the National BioBlitz, we're doubling rarity points for all the non-natives. So in actual fact, you'll get 4 points for this one. Slipper limpet is the second most commonly recorded Crepidulia faunata. This one, in contrast to the barnacles, is pretty much unmistakable, I would say. It's 5 centimeters long. That's a pretty medium-sized shell. And it's got this internal flat surface, which none of our native limpets do, which sort of covers half of the inside of the shell. So look out for that. That's why it's called a slipper limpet. It looks a little bit like a slipper you can put your foot into. And the outer surface is pale. It's got growing lines and brown patches over it. There isn't really any species, I would say, that looks similar to this species in this country, so it should be pretty safe to identify. It comes originally from the eastern coast of America and all the way down to the Caribbean, and you often find it in stacks. Basically, they stack up on top of each other. I'm not 100% sure why they do that. Do you know why they do that stacking behavior, John?
Yes, well, it's actually a kind of family arrangement, a mating stack with the
That
female.
makes sense, yeah.
The sort of the matriarch is at the bottom at any given time, and so females at the bottom, and then they as you move up the stack, intersex and males, and so they will mate inside that group.
Oh wow, okay.
And so if the bottom female dies, everybody kind of moves up a notch, as it were.
Does it really? Okay.
You often
Wow.
find that the stack is at its base has a dead large shell, which would have been the sort of matriarch at one time, but now everybody else is sitting on. There's a new basal female at the bottom, as it were. So they're a kind of hermaphrodite called a sort of sequential hermaphrodite, because they're sort of juveniles and then they're males, and then they undergo a change of gender as they work their way down the stack as the bottom one dies, and so they go from male to female.
That's incredible.
It's quite a strange thing, but they can reach down and mate from the male down further down the stack with the females.
I've never heard of a mollusk matriarch before, but that's fascinating. Thank you very much, John. So these guys are very common, particularly in the south. See, we've got some records in northern England and some in Scotland. So do you think that's a fair representation of the map there for slipper limpets, John?
Oh, yeah, they're definitely limited to the southern end of Great Britain or UK, and it took quite a long time for them to break out around the corner from the south coast and move up through Wales, and as you see, they're now in Northern Ireland as well.
I know
some beaches I think that's fair enough.
Yeah. Some beaches in central southern England, like you can barely put your foot down without treading on, really.
Yes, and you get these immense assemblages of shells washed up on the beach in the Channel Coast, around the Isle of Wight and places like that. You get these big sort of empty shell beaches quite high on the shore with all the accumulation of the dead shells.
Thank you, John. Okay, so Japanese wildweed is number 3, and this is one that we're very familiar with down here in the southwest. So I've been living down here for 10 years now, and they were a problem when I arrived, but nothing like they are at the moment. So they've really expanded in their abundance. I mean, they were very much here when I arrived 10 years ago, but they seemed like they didn't really overwinter that well. Now they're pretty much present and quite bushy over the winter, and then by the time the spring comes, they're really sort of taking over the rock pools. And I should imagine in that time they've also spread around the country. They're from, as their name suggests, they're from the Pacific shores around Japan, also China and Korea around there. They've been in this country since the 70s, but it's only recently they've really sort of taken up. Latin name is Sargassum muticum, and they're quite a large seaweed. They're always in rock pools when you find them intertidally. If you go snorkeling, you'll see the really large individuals in there amongst the kelp as well. And those fronds can be quite a bit over 1 meter long. They've got quite sort of thin, narrow little leaves, which are toothed, and you can see also in that picture there the gas bladders. So they've got these tiny little air bladders throughout the fronds, and that's what enables them in the rock pools to lift right up, or if they're just out there in the subtidal area with the kelp, you can see them raising up into the water column because they're being lifted by these gas bladders. In terms of similar species, I feel like we're so familiar with wireweed down here in the southwest now that we sort of recognise it without. It's a bit like saying, how do you recognise a grey squirrel, I suppose. There aren't that many species to confuse it with. It's come up with Cisticeria species. There is one, I think it's Cisticeria baccata, bushy berry rack, which does actually look a little bit similar to wireweed at first glance anyway. But that's much rarer down here anyway. I don't know if it's more common elsewhere. But do look out for those air bladders, and you should be able to ID this one fairly easily. And just the one rarity point for Japanese wireweed, probably because we've just been recording it frenetically down here in the southwest since we've been running these BioBlitz battles. Bond Mason's hookweed. So that's what we started off with, and the first species, non-native species, to be recorded in the UK. And the Latin name for this one is Bond Masonia hamifera. This one's also native to Japan. It comes in two forms. So it's the gametophyte form, which is the one that you can see pictured here, is the one that people are most familiar with, and I would suggest the only one that you should really attempt to record, because the other form, which is the tetraphyte form, which is called Tralelia, is quite similar to an awful lot of red seaweed. It's a bushy sort of tuft of red seaweed. So it's better to identify the more sort of substantial gametophyte form, and they are quite a pretty feathery-looking seaweed. And they have these hooks. This is why it gets their name. It's a Bond Mason's hookweed. The hooks are quite prominent. So they're crozier shape, which is like the hook of a bishop's scepter. So yeah, a curly sort of hook. And if you get these in a pot, and get a good picture, if you've got a macro function on your phone, you should be able to pick up these hooks fairly easily, and make sure you do, because then that'll help people verify your record when you've made it. And this has been compared to Bond Mason's fernweed, which I'm not familiar with myself. It must be a rarer species, but I know for a fact that this species doesn't have those hooks, and so even if it does look similar as a feathery red, if it hasn't got those hooks, it won't be Bond Mason's hookweed. And this species, you can see on the map here, it's predominantly on the western side of the country, and very commonly recorded on the western side of Scotland and up into northern Scotland. We've got records down here in the southwest and central south coast, but we don't see it that much. We've recorded it at the Rockpool Project, so it's not unheard of, but we don't see it a lot. And I noticed from the map earlier that a lot of those records actually accumulated at the end of the 19th century into the beginning of the 20th century. So it seems like it's almost arrived in the south and moved on to Scotland, where it's proliferated, which is quite unusual. I don't know if John or Chris, you can explain a little bit more about what's happened there.
Chris may know more than I do, so I'll bow to Chris.
Not really. I mean, I would imagine it's climate. It probably likes it a bit colder, maybe. Would be a guess, but I don't know. Yeah.
I do seem to remember, in fact, that I thought that the Treailiella stage was what was predominant up in Scotland. So
right.
you
Okay.
get that stage of the life history cycle, but not necessarily the gametophyte stage.
Am I right in saying that that's a tricky one to identify, that life form, because it's not something that I would know myself?
We wouldn't attempt it.
No.
You'd have to go to a seaweed expert.
The gametophyte is what you look for, really, and anything beyond that is very tricky. One thing to say about that is it's a very distinctive pale pink color. Once you've seen it, the coloration is rather different from your typical red alga. It's a sort of strange pale pink, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same color as harpoon weed that we're going to be getting onto. Cool. All right. Well, I mean, some people are recording it in Scotland one way or another. So if you're up in Scotland, then it's one to definitely be aware of. And 7 rarity points. So the rarity points go up to 10. If it's only got one record on iNaturalist, it's worth 10 points. This is obviously not well recorded on iNaturalist at the moment. So a good one to get if you can. So Pacific oyster. So this one's a real humdinger. It can be told. Well, let me just see what we've got coming up on the slideshow before I start rabbiting on about it. The Latin name is Magdalena gigas. John and Chris, it recently changed, didn't it? No, I mean, this is the recent version, but there was an older version. Is that right?
Cross Austria gigas.
Yeah, it was. So be aware of that. If you're using a guidebook, it's an old guidebook. It's changed its Latin name recently. It's fairly large mollusk, up to 18 centimeters long, and it's got a very thick, but also very sort of rough. It is rough. I mean, you can definitely. Chris and I were talking about this earlier today. You can damage yourself on these things, and also quite wavy. Their shell, both the shell itself and the margin of the shell. It has some dark markings, particularly you see them more actually down here in Cornwall. People, the Cornwall Wildlife Trust have got a program to try and, well, not eradicate, but control these this species, and they hit them with hammers. And then on the inside of the shell, you can see these purple-brown markings. You can't really miss it. And this is the native oyster that we've got down here in the bottom. Right. This it's much more sort of flat. It's more circular. It does have ridges, but they're much weaker. And I think we don't really often see native oysters in the intertidal zone anyway. For the reading that I've done, you can get them in the low shore, but they must be quite rare there. Whereas the Pacific oysters, in some places we see them all the time, and actually quite high up the shore. In terms of the shape, the Pacific oysters and also the native oysters, to some extent, can adapt their shape based on the rock that they're attached to, so it can be quite changeable amongst the different individuals. But they're fairly easy to distinguish, and if you find an oyster rock pooling, then there's a good chance that it is a Pacific oyster, I would say, rather than a native oyster. The history of these guys is that they were deliberately brought over during the 1960s for commercial agriculture, and people at the time, I don't know if they claimed this or presumed it, but the assumption was that the Pacific oysters would not be able to successfully spread and settle and spawn in British waters because it was too cold, that turned out to be completely wrong, and now it's one of the most detrimental and widespread non-native species that we've got in the region. Christoph, I see we've got a few things coming in on the chat. Feel free to sort of stop me if there's anything that I should drill with now rather than at the end.
So I've said people to we hang on to the end. There was one very specific one, which was just how big are the hooks on the previous seaweed? I think to say they're pretty small, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they're about a centimeter at most. Maybe that's exaggerating it a little bit, but they're just in my experience of seeing it, you definitely can see them. So they're not microscopic. I would say maybe half a centimeter to a centimeter.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
That
John
seems about right. That yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much. Yeah, for any other sort of specific questions for the species, Christoph, send them straight through whilst we're on that one. Yeah, very commonly recorded this one, so just the one rarity point, but all points count towards your total score. Now, this is one I'm not familiar with myself, the stalked sea squirt, which on the Stelia clava, and it's a pretty big sea squirt, 20 centimeters tall. And has it's pretty brown on the outside and dark brown stripes on the inside. But having a look at the picture, at least it does look very distinguishable in terms of the leveriness of its of the outside of it, and very tough. And I think the reason why I'm not seeing much of it is it tends to be found in marinas and harbours, and that's where John and Chris do a lot of their work. So I'm sure you guys must be very familiar with this species.
Yeah. I mean, we call it the leathery sea squirt, but it's very tough and it feels very leathery. And we do find it on the shores, usually a bit smaller than it, quite significantly smaller than in marinas, but say attached under a boulder or something like that. Yeah, but it is present on shores in the southwest.
One thing to note about it is it actually has a stalk, which you can't see in the photograph that you have, but below what you can see in the photograph, it narrows right down to a fairly thin stalk, which then is attached by sort of holdfast onto the substrate. And it's the only sea squirt we have of any size, certainly, that has a stalk. And the other thing to mention is
I read that in your guide, and I couldn't actually see the stalk in any of the pictures that I could find online.
But also to note you have two siphons which are very much at one end of the body, and fairly close together, which isn't always the case either in a sea squirt.
So the siphons are this bit here on the picture, and this is where the sea squirt will either be taking in water or expelling it, and that's how they feed. So they filter the water in that way, and different species have them arranged differently. So you're saying that this species have them both at the end there like that.
I think there are photos in the guide that do show the stalk. I think there's one. There's a photo that shows it, and there's a line drawing as well, I think.
Excellent. And 4 rarity points for this one. So perhaps an easy win if you live near a marina, because are they pretty much guaranteed to be found in most marinas in certain parts of the country?
Yeah.
Okay. Oyster thief. So this is another one that we are very familiar with down in the southwest, and it's only one that I only found out last year that this is actually a non-native. It's been around for a long time. Copperminia pellegrina is the Latin name for it, and it says 3 to 9 centimeters. I think I have seen them much better. I've heard stories of them being big as footballs. I think I've definitely seen them over 9 centimeters. They're definitely very variable in their size. So I wouldn't use size in any kind of way to sort of distinguish them from native species. And yeah, they tend to have they often have air inside them. So they have these sort of thin walls, papery walls to their tissues, but they're like blobs basically. And that tissue, it tears like paper. So if you are to touch it, it will actually sort of rip open. And that's significant because the species that it's similar to, it's called here the sea cauliflower. I'm sure I've heard it called something else. Anybody? I can't remember what it is. I've never called it sea cauliflower. Leafisia marina. Anyone heard of a better common name for it than that?
No.
No, I thought I've heard of it. It's called something. I think in the shore search sorry, the sea search seaweed book, it's called something else, but I can't remember. But anyway, that's the name for that one is Leafisia marina, and you can see from the picture there that species is yeah, it looks quite similar, but it's more gelatinous, and it tends to disintegrate as you touch it rather than tear. It doesn't have air inside it, but it can be quite tricky to distinguish the two. All I can say is, yeah, same with any of these species, get a good picture of it, and in this case also, it's definitely worth touching it to try and distinguish them. But yeah, often down here, I would say it's oyster thief rather than and sea cauliflower that you'll come across. No, these down here. 2 rarity points for this. So even this one that you find all the time, people just don't tend to record seaweeds as much as animals. So we tend to get better points for seaweeds on that basis. Right, harpoon weed. This one's Asparagus armata. Is related to Bob Mason's hookweed, and it's a similar colour. The colour that John was mentioning is quite unusual for a red seaweed. It's not really a red seaweed in terms of its colour. It's a pink seaweed, and this one's very common down here in the southwest and spreading up the western coast of the country. Up to 30 centimeters long. That's quite big, I would say, in my experience. Maybe elsewhere in the world, it might grow that size. I would say yeah, 15 to 20 centimeters long is more typical. And the key thing to identify this particular species are harpoon-like branches. You can just about see them in the picture here. I did manage to get another picture off of iNaturalist that shows them better, which I'll show in the next slide. And these branches, they can attach to other seaweed. Sometimes when we have a storm and some of our rock pools are full of seaweed that's been ripped up, this stuff can be just attached to all sorts of different bits and pieces. And it's actually one of the ways that it gets about. It's you know, as it drifts around on the currents attached to other stuff. This species is endemic to the southern hemisphere and probably Australia and New Zealand. The rest of the seaweed has a very sort of feathery shaped fronds. And it is similar, I would say, to Bob Mason's hookweed. And the straightforward way of telling the difference is looking at these appendages. So they're not hooks, they're harpoons. 3 rarity points for this one. Here's the harpoons here. In fact, this one seems quite extreme. These really look quite massive harpoon-like structures that are attached to this one. They're not normally quite as big as that, but they do look like this. So, I would say they're probably a bit bigger than the hooks on the Bob Mason's hookweed. They can be well over 1 centimeter to 2 centimeters. So look out for them. Very common down here in the southwest and spreading elsewhere. Okay, so next one is must be coming to the end of the top 10 here. Is the orange tip sea squirt. So this one here, Corella imota. Slightly translucent, so as you can see there from that picture, it's yeah, a little bit opaque, but you can see actually through the outside into the individual there, and it's got one siphon at the free end there, and one thing that I think is the easiest way to identify this particular sea squirt is the gut. So you can see the gut showing on this individual here. It's quite often this kind of sort of yellowy, sort of orange color, and it forms a anticoral spiral, that should say, the missing L on the end of that. And then they said that this is similar to the European Ascidian. We call that one dirty sea squirt. I don't know why. It's quite a fun thing to say, you dirty sea squirt. But it's they are quite different. Once you got your eye in, the European sea squirt is much more sort of textured on the outside of it. It's got 2 siphons on the end of it. You won't be able to see a gut like that. And so yeah, it's pretty easy to distinguish this particular sea squirt, and found in many parts of the country. Actually, I can see there that it's one of these species that is found up in the northeast, which many of these other ones aren't so prevalent in. So if you're based around that area, this is definitely one to look out for. 3 rarity points for that one. And this is, I think, the last one of the top 10, the Eastern oyster drill, and It's similar to another species that we get a lot of, but it's relatively rare compared to these other species that we're talking about. It's a beautiful shell for both of these species, and up to 4 centimeters long. Again, that's fairly big. They're usually about sort of 2 or 3 centimeters. And they're lobed in terms of the vertical ridges you can see there on this individual. If I can get my pointer there. This is what it means with the ridges that are running vertically up and down the shell, and it hibernates in the mud during cold winter periods, apparently. And the species that it's similar to is the European stingwinkle, and we get an awful lot of those. And I think, let me see what I've got next. 10 rarity points. There's only 1 record on on iNaturalist for this one. So if you get this one, then yeah, make sure you do record it. But it's very difficult to distinguish from the native species. Make sure you check out John and Chris's book. I was going to put in a picture from your book on here to distinguish them, but it's all about how the opening is a little bit closed up, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we'd probably send it off to the Conchological Society for confirmation. We wouldn't necessarily feel confident, because it's not common in this area anyway. It's you know, mainly in the Washen areas. But yeah, we personally wouldn't be confident to identify it. So
is it common? It's common in the east there.
Yeah, around the Wash area. Yeah,
it's not the Wash, Chris. It's down in the sort of.
It looks like the Thames, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's
right, okay,
eastern Kent, isn't it? And it has been in Essex as well. So it's the blue blob you can see there.
But I think it's also declining a bit as well. We don't see it in marinas. It's only a shore species.
I mean, it's on rocky shores essentially, and I guess eating barnacles or mussels.
Well, we do have at least one person from Kent joining us tonight. So if you do find anything, if you find a stingwinkle, have a good look at it and make sure you check out the guides beforehand to see how to distinguish those 2 species. But with all of these, you can, if you've got anything that you've got any you know, doubts about that could be an invasive species, just you can take more than 1 picture for when you're recording on iNaturalist, and from different angles, and make sure you get as much information as possible on there for people to have a look at and determine for themselves later on. Okay, so we're almost at 8 o'clock, and we've done the top 10, but I have got a quick bonus crab section, so hopefully if people don't need to rush off, because I know everybody loves crabs, and we haven't really touched on them too much as yet. The big players, well, there are 3 big players, I would say, when it comes to non-native crabs to look out for. So this one, the brush claw shore crab, again, is present over in the east. There's not many records for it, but chatting to the guys today, it's clear that it's probably a little bit more abundant than that. So some of these dots on the map don't necessarily represent a single individual, but they could be a survey where they found many individuals. So this one is present in the east of the country, Hemigrapsis takanoi. Quite compact crab, they say. So I think it's quite sort of a square sort of shape compared to our native species. And I saw it for the first time myself today because Chris and John had a stand at the event we were at, and so I saw some individuals there. And estuarine and marine, a little bit like our shore crab. So that's probably the most likely thing that you'll confuse it with our native green shore crab. So the main thing to look for there is the space between the eyes. So the shore crab have teeth between the eyes, but the brush-clawed Asian crab is very straight between the eyes. So make sure you get a good picture of between the eyes, and also from the side of the eyes. They've also got teeth behind the eyes, which can be used to identify it. So fairly well recorded on iNaturalist. I was a little bit surprised by that. So people over there in the east must be spotting it quite a lot. Now, there's a very closely related species, also Hemigrapsis sangrinus, Asian shore crab, which they're both from the same part of the world, and they are very similar. I wouldn't say it's quite a challenge. I saw them both today. They are very similar to actually distinguish them. The brush-clawed crab has little tufts on its claws, so that's one way to tell the difference, I suppose. But I wouldn't be so bold as to say that if it doesn't have tufts, it's definitely not the brush-clawed. But maybe Chris and John can help me out with that as well. But they're very closely related. Make sure you take a photo of those eyes and the teeth. So in this case, the teeth which are going back from the eyes. And again, it's quite similar to the shore crab, but this one's very rarely recorded. It's both of the species are very common invasive species on the continent, and so they've been on the sort of like red alert list for a long time. But this one doesn't really seem to have arrived at all. There's I think there's only 3 points on this map, maybe slightly more elsewhere.
I'll jump in there, Ben. No, there are only a few locations. And if anyone actually thinks they've really got one, then we would want it to be sent off to the Natural History Museum for confirmation. So it's not. There's a few ad hoc records. There is no sign of it being established here. So if someone is confident that that's what it is, then we want them to collect a specimen, stick it in their freezer, and get it sent off. But it would be a good idea to send some photos to us first, but then we'd want it sent off to the Natural History Museum because it would be quite an important record.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Chris. And I've got, and yes, 20 rare points, which means it's not on iNaturalist at all at the moment. So that'll double up to 40 if you were to find one. This is a slide with images from your guide, which is giving the sort of specifics of what we need pictures for. So if, any Hemigrapsis, I would say, make sure you get good pictures of the eyes. And if you think it could be Sengrenus, put it on there, and we'll definitely pick it up straight away at our end, looking at the iNaturalist project. And we'll speak to Chris and John, and by looks of it, they'll be speaking to you, really, because this is an important, it would be an important record.
If I could jump in, Ben, it looks actually quite similar to the marbled rock crab, or the Pachygrapparus marmotote. I've never said that word before, but that's so Liz has said she's pretty confident they've got them in the Channel Islands, but I think that might
they're all over the Channel Islands. Both species. Okay, both species.
One I would count as a range expander that's present in France and maybe making its way northwards, but the other is is a classic invasive species. So distinguishing those two would be really interesting and probably worth a lot of points for either.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not familiar with that species. So you're saying that it's expanding its range, but it's not technically non-native.
I would put it as I think there's one or two records of it in the UK, but I mean it's basically the same range as the St. Piran's hermit crab. So if it does turn up, I would count it as a climate colonist rather than an invasive. Okay.
And then the last one, which I put in here, is quite a well-known invasive species in this country, the Chinese mitten crab. Not one that's come up much rock pooling before. It's much more of a freshwater and estuarine species. Very long legs, and it does have really dense sort of brown fur on its claws. I've never seen one, actually. I don't know if Christoph, have you seen one? I'm sure Chris and John have.
We had one walk into the Weatherspoons in Durham.
Is that the start of a joke, or is that
email I've ever received was, "Can you come see this crab that's walked into our bookshop?"
Wow.
They migrate in masses down the rivers, so they come down to breed in the seawater. So that's the only time you'd see them in a marine setting, is when they come down to reproduce. But in places in Europe, they do come out in like canals and places like that, and cover harbor walls and things, because they have this mass migration. Okay. So and most of the pictures I verify on iRecorder are them in fields and things, because they can transfer across land, which is not something that any of our other crabs do.
And into Weatherspoons, apparently.
Yeah.
Cool. So 3 rarity points for this. So it's been recorded on iNaturalist, but yeah, it's not hugely. So you can get some decent points if you get to Chinese missing crab. So that's it for the species profiles. Just to mention that these and many other invasive species, we've got information and maps for them on the Big Rockpool Challenge Hub, which hopefully many of you have signed up to. If you haven't, go to the National BioBlitz page, and then you'll actually be able to do that and get involved in the National BioBlitz. So that's where we're at. But it's well. I was going to say there's time for questions. We're actually over time, but I don't have to rush off. So if I'm happy to take questions, and I can see that we've got quite a bit in the chat already.
That was great, Ben. I'm going to ask everyone if we do a little clap for Ben for giving us a wonderful talk last hour or so.
Thank you, Christoph. I know there's a clapping emoji on the
emoji. Okay, great. So we've had a few questions. A few of them I think are asking about more the sort of the Rockpool project in general, but I think there is some distinctions between what's happening next week and the Rockpool project in general. So I ask you to go through those if that's all right. So
go for it.
So Rutu was asked, are observations around lakes or rivers or canals valid for the Rockpool project? For those who can't those who don't have access or can't get to the beach. That also jumps into Christine's question, which is, do fines have to be in a rock pool? What about fines on the open shore? I assume that is meaning beaches and like, or estuaries. So I'll can you comment on that?
Okay, yeah, we do want this to be a marine-based BioBlitz. So I'm afraid sort of really far inland freshwater records probably won't count. The actual way that records are being filtered is all the records will be collected in a project on iNaturalist, which is called the National BioBlitz Project, and that it filters them by there's like a coastal map around the whole country. I think it extends inland by 200 meters and out to sea by 300 meters, and so they need to be recorded within that that boundary around the coast, but they don't have to be in rock pools. So anywhere around the coast will be okay. We may, I don't want to, this is a bit boring, so I won't go into it. We may have to change that because sometimes people's records can be excluded even if they're there, if they don't have a very high accuracy on their GPS. But we would probably, whatever we do, we'd be probably trying to keep this as a marine focused BioBlitz, I'm afraid. But hopefully we can find a way for you to join another way, Rita.
As someone who lives in Derbyshire, I would be keen to know how people can get involved who are not on
you can certainly check out what's coming in on iNaturalist, and if you do have any familiarity with these species, you can help verify them. And if you don't, you can just stay up to date and see what we're finding.
Christine has asked, do fines have to be alive? Would washed up shells of, say, slipper limpets count?
Yeah, so we just follow the iNaturalist rules on this, and they do allow dead specimens to be recorded, empty shells. You can, I don't think you can do it on the app, but if you record them on the app and then log in on via desktop to your account, you can then check that it's dead, and the sort of exactly what kind of record it is. So that is valid, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can record wilder things like scat and the like. I don't think that would count for any rockpool species, but for there's lots of different ways you can record the presence of an animal on iNaturalist. Cool. Another question from Rutu: what happens with all the points at the end? Do the teams get any rewards / recognition?
Well, we'll certainly give some recognition. We don't have any prizes lined up for the National BioBlitz, I'm afraid, but we'll be making a big fuss. So it's not team-based, this particular BioBlitz, because it's around the country. It'd be an individual league. We'll also be having a look at regions as well, to see who's doing what in each region.
So to cover that on our regular Rockpool events, there are routinely prizes, but not obviously at all events. It's down to being sponsored by local companies and the like.
That's right, yeah. So local businesses quite often kindly donate prizes. This is our first national BioBlitz. We're hopefully looking to do it every year. Hopefully next year we might get some big sponsor offering mega prizes. Who knows? But the most important thing, I think, is to give people recognition for their achievements, and we'll certainly be doing that.
Katie Duncan, I think, has said, I've forgotten which species it was, but I think she's referring to the common name you were trying to get, and she said,
"Oh yes, I knew. I was looking for you, Kate. I thought you would come good there."
She's had to dash off. I know that was different, Kate. But I would call a sea potato. I mean, this is the issue with common names. I would call a sea potato a type of sea urchin. Was that, you know, those like small balls?
Yeah, it was called a sea cauliflower. You're getting your vegetables mixed up, but they call it a sea cauliflower, and it's Leafisia marina. I'm sure I'd have to run and get the book. I'm sure they call it something else in there.
Lottie's asked, is there any attempts at eradication for some of these species?
Well, so I mentioned about the Cornwall Wildlife Trust and the Pacific Oyster Project. I wouldn't call that an attempt at eradication, because I don't think that there's any pretense that they'd be able to eradicate those species. But you know, once they're so fully established, I don't think. For marine species, sadly, it's once it gets to the stage where invasive species is well established, it's really very, very difficult to even consider that extent. But I know from speaking to the guys at Natural England that if things are recorded early enough and they can put operations into action, then they can look to eradicate it if it's still just local. But I'm sure John and Chris will know better than me on these things.
Yeah, I mean, there have been one or two attempts at eradication of things which are just in a single marina, which have actually not been successful. It can be extraordinarily difficult because of the open system really that you're working in. And also you need to be very, very ready with the equipment and the manpower to respond quickly. If you're having to gear up and get permissions to do things and acquire equipment and so on, it very quickly becomes too late.
We did see today, at the forum we're at today, we did see an inspiring talk from people from East Anglia about mink attempts to deal with mink, and but that's been present in this country for many, many decades, and many attempts to eradicate it. And basically, it looks like they've kind of cracked it. I would say. I mean, they've managed to eradicate it from East Anglia, and their methodology they're then taking it elsewhere in the country. So that's encouraging, but it just seems to me that the marine environment is a slightly different ballgame again, just because it is so open and difficult to access. But you never say never, I suppose.
Good you brought that up, because Lottie, the original question answer, says she works for the mink eradication project. So she's
there you go.
Trying to eye up a different species or marine species to.
Were you at the forum today, Lottie?
No, I wasn't, sadly. But I think members of my trust were. But I'm actually a marine biologist, which is why this seminar flagged to me.
I see. Okay.
Because I was like, oh, invasive marine species. So no, that's.
I think they were from the West Rivers Trust, and it couldn't be West, because they weren't in the West. Emily Williamson and
Darren
Tansley.
Yeah, they're from Essex Wildlife Trust.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. The project's working really, really well. So I just thought I understand with the open system it would be hard, but just wondered how it would work, if it would work.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Things can be done. I mentioned about the lionfish situation out in the Caribbean, which has gone crazy. They have a lot of a big campaign to have lionfish derbies, so scuba divers spearfish them, and it does have an impact on the population sizes, which is important, because keeping the numbers down reduces the impact that they have on native species. So there are things that can be done sometimes.
I was going to ask, just as a bounce off from that, okay, if eradication isn't possible, what is the outlook then for native species if we're being if we've got lots of non-natives, is there anything we can do about it other than just record the sightings?
The Pacific oysters, it seems to be the one that springs to mind that people are doing. I was chatting to Chris earlier on about the prospect of people eating them. They can be tricky to get off the rocks as the main issue, but potentially there's more that can be done there in terms of eating obviously not the ones that have actually been grown in agriculture, but the ones that are actually wild.
Yeah, there's a problem there, Ben. In this country, you're not supposed to eat any of them that aren't from designated
yes, of course,
safe water zones. So if you're in the foul or something, you know, you'd be okay eating them off the shore. But for most places around the country, the water has not been checked for the, you know, shellfish diseases. So no one would be encouraged to actually pick them off the shore and eat them.
I believe it's true to say that in southeast England, there are naturalized populations, feral populations, which are being exploited commercially now. Isn't that right, Chris?
Yeah, but it's not with, you know, I don't know quite how they're exploiting them, to be honest.
No.
I think it's probably just under the radar and you know, a blind eye has been turned to it. But
well, I guess if they're in correct waters, if they're
yeah, that's what I'm saying. If the water's been designated,
there's no impediment.
Yeah.
And then other ones like the wildweed. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare, really. You don't really want to be trying to rip it out because it's got all these propagules that just fall off it, and you're probably doing more harm than good. So, yeah, it can be very tricky.
All right, thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks for your question. Any other questions before we sign off, Christoph? I know we're very late now.
No, we've got a few people shooting off and saying thank you very much. So I'll pass those on to you. Christine,
I don't know if you want to cover the last slides, Christoph, because we've got a QR code of the national BioBlitz and stuff. Yeah, just to say that as we've been talking about a lot, national BioBlitz is getting on. Please do take a picture of this QR code and this will take you to the Big Rock Challenge Hub that I mentioned, where you actually sign up. And of course, we've still got more. This is just the second of 5 webinars we've got Jan McLennan from Natural England talking tomorrow. So she'd be a good person when it comes to talking about what can be done and why bother monitoring in the first place. So I'll be hosting that one tomorrow. So looking forward to that. And next week we've got Dr. Nova Miskowska, my old boss at the MBA. Who runs the Marklin project who's been surveying our shores around the country for many years now, and so she'll be talking about giving her insights into how invasive species have been affecting different parts of the country. And then finally we got Christoph. It's just ahead of half term. You'll be providing your rock pooling 101, which is a great opportunity for people who haven't been rock pooling before to just the basics of how to actually get out there and do it. So we're looking forward to that. I think it's probably a good time to sign off. Thank you, Christoph.
Yeah, no, that's great. A few more thank yous coming through. So yeah, well, thank you very much for joining, everyone, and well, thank you again for Ben for
and a big thanks to John and Chris for joining as well and giving us your expert insights. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Cool. See you guys. Thanks very much.
Cheers, then.